In this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a $49 Rielle the Everwise Commander deck. Let's get started. Total cost of this deck is just under $49 as of the day of recording, and this deck is 1DH legal, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the Commander, who can be up to $5. Rielle the Everwise is a 3-to-cast 0/3 that gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery in our graveyard. Also comes with the ability, whenever we discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So we're going to try and take advantage of this by using lots of wheel, loot, and rummage effects, helping us to discard cards, draw bunches of new cards, put lots of instants and sorceries in our graveyard, pumping Rielle up, and then give her evasion, so that we can knock players out using Voltron or commander damage. If you get 21 points of damage on a player with just your commander, that person gets knocked out. Sometimes that can be just in one swing. Most often I found it was 2 swings with Rielle, and then occasionally you might be able to get somebody in 3 or maybe more. If that strategy is not working out, we have a sub-tokens theme where we're able to generate a good number of tokens and hopefully KO people that way. This deck is also running a very large counterspell package, allowing us to protect our own game plan while disrupting our opponents. To get into our game plan, we're going to be hoping to play at least one Accelerant, although we're only running 4 in this deck. The 4 we have are Sphere of Suns, Everflowing Chalice, and Guardian Idol, all of which come down on turn 2. Everflowing Chalice has the upside of being able to cast it for 4 or 6, giving us an even greater mana payoff, but I never cast it for that in playtesting, so you probably won't in the majority of your games either. And then lastly, we have the Dreamscape Artist, which helps to ramp us, and if Rielle's out, can also get us some extra card draw. As for our game plan, we are running 17 cards specific to that. We have Spellheart Chimera and Enigma Drake, similar to Rielle. They have power and toughness equal to the number of sorcery cards in our graveyard. They come with added evasion in flying. The Chimera also has trample. We also have Invade the City, which increases our instant and sorcery count and can give us a really big creature depending on the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard. Another creature that makes for a good attacker or blocker is the Pteramander. Starts out as a 1/1 flyer, but if we can activate its Adept 4 ability, it becomes a 5/5 flyer, and very easy to activate, especially if we wield once or twice, as the Adept ability costs 1 less for each instant and sorcery in our graveyard. Runechanter's Pipe can pump up any of our creatures, giving it +X/+0 and first strike, where X is the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard. If getting in with big creatures isn't working for us, we also have Nadir Kraken, Ominous Seas, and Talaran Sky Summoner, all of which help us to generate some token creatures. Nadir Kraken can make us 1/1 tentacles as long as we're drawing cards and have the mana for it. Ominous Seas is going to make us 8/8 Krakens, probably 1, maybe more than 1 per turn, as long as we have Rielle out and our wheels are spinning. And then Talaran Sky Summoner makes us a 2/2 Drake anytime we cast an instant or sorcery. We are running 33 of them in this deck, so very easy to make multiple Drakes per turn. Most of the spells in our deck have a very low converted mana cost, so not hard to amass an army of Drakes. For some extra evasion for our big creatures, we have Wonder, Key to the City, and the Prowler's Helm. Wonder gives all of our creatures flying if it, as well as an island, is in our graveyard. Very easy to get it into our graveyard, as we have lots of ways to discard cards, such as Key to the City, which can help to trigger Rielle, getting us some extra card draw, and also makes one of our bigs unblockable. And then Prowler's Helm, which almost always makes our creatures unblockable, as long as our opponents aren't playing walls. For some protection, we have the Mirror Shield and Nirok Stealth Suit, which give us Hexproof or Shroud. The shield also helps us to deal with Death Touch creatures and gives us a little extra toughness, while Lazotap Plating gives all of our creatures Hexproof and gives us a 1/1 zombie. Turn Aside and Keep Safe help to counter spells that target our permanents, and Dispel, while it can disrupt our opponent's game plan, I almost found I was always casting it as protection, as it counters an instant spell. As for interference, we are running 23 cards to interfere with our opponent's game plan. We have Negate, Is It Charm, and Unwind, which can help us to counter non-creature spells. Izzet Charm comes with a couple extra modes which help us to deal with small problematic creatures, or we can even use it to trigger Rielle drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards to draw us 2 more new cards. Disdainful Stroke, Arcane Denial, and Neutralize give us some more counterspell options. Neutralize comes with Cycling, which allows us to discard a card to draw a card. If Rielle's out, we're going to be drawing 2 cards instead. Flame Slash, Collective Defiance, and Ironcrag Pyromancer help us to deal with small to mid-sized problematic creatures. Collective Defiance comes with the upside of also helping us to deal damage to opponents, or that third bullet doesn't say but has been errated to allow us to deal 3 damage to planeswalkers, or the ability to wheel our own hand, drawing new cards, even more so if Rielle is on the battlefield. Spite of Mogis, Beacon Bolt, and Blitz of the Thunder Raptor help us to get rid of some bigger creatures in that they deal damage equal to the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard. Jumpstart on Beacon Bolt allows us to cast it from our graveyard, and Spite of Mogis comes with Scry, which helps us to smooth out our draws. Soul's Fire is similar to the last 3 cards in that we have so many creatures that's power is equal to the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard that we're usually dealing damage to something equal to the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard. Reality Shift just exiles a creature, and Welcome to the Fold helps us to steal our opponent's creatures. Exclude just counters a creature, draws us a card, while Annul counters an artifact or enchantment. Abrade, Commit, and Shredded Sails help us to deal with multiple kinds of permanents. Shredded Sails also comes with the upside of having Cycling, and Commit comes with the second mode of Memory, allowing us to cast it from our graveyard. I put this in here mostly to protect us from milling ourselves out, as we are wheeling a whole bunch. In playtesting, I never had to use Memory, although I did get very close to milling out my entire library in one of the games. Never had to end up using it. Mizium Mortars, Chain Reaction, and Brawl's Expertise help us to control the board. Mizium Mortars can target a single creature, or we can deal 4 damage to all of our opponent's creatures. Chain Reaction is usually going to wipe the board, dealing X damage, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. And then Brawl's Expertise bounces 3 artifacts or creatures, and then allows us to cast a card from our hand that costs 4 or less. Almost all the cards in this deck do cost 4 or less, so anything in your hand is pretty much wide open, with the exception of 1 other card. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that provide consistency to this deck. We are running 17. First off, we have Rielle. Obviously, she provides consistency as long as you're triggering that second ability. You're going to be getting lots of extra card advantage. Kinetic Augur and Crackling Doom provide more card advantage in that the Augur allows us to cycle cards. If Rielle is out, we're going to be drawing even more. They also have power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in our graveyard. Crackling Drake comes with the upside of also counting instants and sorceries we have in exile, and it draws us a card when it enters. These are the top 3 cards in the deck. We have Angie's Ravager, Forgotten Creation, and Avaricious Dragon. All 3 of these help us to wheel our hands. If you noticed, I didn't have very many super payoff cards. You can build that deck this way, but I didn't want a lot of cards that were no good if I didn't have Rielle on the battlefield. Avaricious Dragon is the one card I put in here because I felt like it was really worth it to have, in that it can really help us to dig through our deck, dump bunches of instants and sorceries into our graveyard, pumping Rielle up as well as our other creatures, and also drawing us a bunch of cards. You do have to be really careful with these 3 out on the battlefield because Rielle will only trigger the first time you discard a card. So be mindful of that. I did make an error in one of my playtesting games, and because I had the Avaricious Dragon out and I had already discarded cards, I ended up losing my entire hand at the end of turn because of a single misplay. So try to be really mindful if you have any 3 of these out, not to be triggering Rielle at the wrong time. If we can't wheel, the next best thing is to loot or rummage. We have the Enclave Cryptologist, Merfolk Looter, and the Merchant of the Veil to help us do that. These are great because in addition to the other wheel effects we just looked at, we can trigger these on our opponent's turn and just help to cycle through our deck a little bit faster, getting extra card advantage. Lastly, for those loot type effects, we have Monastery Siege. So long as we choose cons, you are probably playing for the long game if you put this out, because it makes it so all of your other wheels won't really work right. So if you do go this route, just know that you're playing for a little bit longer of a game. Hoarding Dragon allows us to pseudo-tutor up an artifact. I was usually getting a piece of protection, but if not, that Rune Chanter's Pipe, which can help pump up our creatures. And then Experimental Overload gives us another creature whose power and toughness is equal to the number of instants and sorceries we have in our graveyard, and also allows us to return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand. Careful Study, Frantic Search, and Desperate Ravings give us more ways to cycle our hand. They're even better if Rielle's on the battlefield. Cathartic Reunion and Thrill of Possibility do more of the same. Do note that some of these are at sorcery speed while others are at instant speed. So if you have multiple options of these in your hand, try to use your sorcery ones and save your instant speed cycling effects for your opponent's turns, because that just gives you more triggers off of Rielle. As for lands, we have 39 in this deck. To start off, we have Desolate Lighthouse, which allows us to cycle and get some extra card advantage if Rielle is out. Evolving Wilds, which helps to fix our colors and thin our deck. And Myriad Landscape, which helps to ramp us. For both of our colors, we have Command Tower, Izzet Boilerworks, Swiftwater Cliffs, and Temple of Epiphany. And then we have 6 cycling lands in the Lonely Sandbar, Remote Isle, Desert of the Mindful, Forgotten Cave, Smoldering Crater, and Desert of the Fervent. All of these come into the battlefield tapped, but come with the upside of allowing us to cycle them. If you have Rielle on the battlefield, that's going to be drawing you 2 cards, so if you don't need that land, go ahead and do that. Rogue's Passage gives us some other options for evasion, and then for basics we have 15 islands and 10 mountains. Average converted mana cost of this deck was 2.56, and the keys to victory: protection and payoff. Try not to cast Rielle unless you have a way to protect her, or a way to get at least 1 payoff off of that triggered discard ability. She drew a lot of hate in my games as she gets really big and helps you get way too much card advantage. So if you can't protect her and you don't have a way to cycle cards, it's not going to be worth it to put her out on the battlefield. Next up is Concentrated Firepower. I found it was really important to try to knock out or concentrate my energies on one particular player at a time, as opposed to kind of keeping the game balanced. Mostly because there was usually 1 or sometimes even 2 commanders that could really hamper you, such as a Brea or Keranos, who can very easily just kill your commander on sight. And so try to concentrate your firepower on 1 player and then move on. Lastly, don't go out with ammo in your hand. This deck is running a lot of counter spells, so try not to get knocked out while you still have those in your hand. It's a very bad feel to have lots of cards to play, but no life to continue playing with. Here are a few cards I would consider if I were to go above that $1 price point. If you want to see some more ideas, check out the link in the description below. Better yet, share your thoughts in the comments what card you would upgrade with. That way, others can see your brilliant ideas and alter to their liking. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any of the new weekly content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right or either of the playlists on the bottom.